Hello, everyone. My name is Sophie Park. I'm the Managing Director of Bayer G4A. Today, I am your host and moderator. I'd like to welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live event here. And yes, we are live. So it's a pleasure to have every one of you join us today. And we're actually excited to continue our event series. So today for our second session, we're asking ourselves, what if we all had digital twins? Bayer is fundamentally driven by science and innovation. Through science, we seek solutions for some of the world's most pressing challenges in medicine and in healthcare for the betterment of our patients. And much like science, which takes us on a path of discovery, our What If series intends to challenge our conventional thinking and imagine new possibilities beyond. So in the next 40 to 45 minutes, we'll look into a future shaped by digital twins and their potential to transform how we develop innovative medicines and also manage our health. The possibilities of digital twins are widely recognized, as most of you may know who are joining this panel, but we face the challenge of collecting high quality data, accurately modeling complexity of human biology, and also designing the right policy frameworks. And today, I'm excited to let you know, we will examine many of these aspects. So without further ado, I'm excited to have our two speakers here with us. Our first panelist is the head of digital pharma policy at Bayer, Kathrin Langguth. Kathrin, welcome.
Hello, Sophie.
And our second speaker is Jasti. He is our SVP and head of R&D data science and AI at Bayer. Hi, Sai. Good to have you with us. All right. So before we get started, I would like to encourage our audience to actually engage with us while we have this discussion. And if you do have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat and we'll actually get to them towards the end of our conversation today. All right. So let's jump in. Kathrin, this question's for you. And I'm just going to, let's set the stage. I'm sure the majority of our audience has come across the term digital twin, here and there. I know I have. I've been hearing it, I've been hearing it for the last 10 years, right? But to clarify for all of us, what is digital twin technology and where do we actually find its origins?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Sophie. And a digital twin is basically a virtual model of an objective, and it's used to mirror either the appearance of that objective or the way it's functioning. And the term or the concept is broadly known since the 1960s already, when digital twins have been used in the aerospace industry in order to control the functioning and simulation of satellites that have been sent to space. And since that days, the virtual twins or digital twins are broadly known in all kinds of industries.
Great. So thanks. And that's very interesting that it's also been used in the aerospace, but now we'll kind of dive into, the crossing of paths that it has with healthcare. And Sai, this one's for you. So, just given that background, I know the possibilities are well, it seems kind of endless, but I mean, it's quite broad. What potential benefits, right, can we either anticipate or see digital twins kind of delivering in the future for healthcare?
Yeah, sure, Sophie. First of all, thank you all for the interest, and I'm really humbled to join with Kathrin here to provide some more insights around what we are doing at Bayer, and also talk a little bit more about the general concept of digital twin. Now, Sophie, as you asked a question, okay, when you see the application of digital twin, it's very broad, right? You can, if you think about applying some things in the manufacturing to improve your manufacturing processes, to all the way from an R&D perspective to improve the patient outcomes. So there is a wide application. Now, tangibly speaking, in the context of R&D, as Kathrin earlier pointed out, it can be a physical object, it could be a process, or it could be a system. So thinking about all the way from a cellular level of a patient to a gene level or to an organ and ultimately get to the human, right? You actually can anticipate like the wide range of possibilities out there. Now, like why we need to envision that, like the scenario is going back to the theme. What if you actually have a virtual twin or a digital twin of a human being, wherein you may not run the clinical trials on the physical patients, you actually can run the clinical trials on this virtual patient. Now, that's maybe really far ahead, but even if you aim for that moonshot, there are so many things that can fall in place to better disease understanding, to have a better understanding of like what we can do in our clinical trials. Say, for example, do we really need a placebo arms? Like as you're conducting clinical trials, obviously you have the population which is getting the medicine and the population you get the placebo arms. Now, if you really want to improve the access to the medicine and bring medicines faster in a personalized way, this is a huge possibility that we can pursue using digital twins.
Very cool. And I know you said, something in the lines of, it may be far out, right? And so let's try to go and sort of realize that moment a bit. So between you, Kathrin, and Sai, how close or distant, right, is the realization of that future, right? Because as I said, I've been hearing a lot about, digital twins. It's obviously, Kathrin mentioned it's been here since the 60s, right, in the aerospace industry, and now really it's becoming a thing in healthcare. But how close or distant is it actually, right, for healthcare, and why? Maybe, Kathrin, you can jump in and start.
Sure, thanks. And yeah, well, it's future and reality, I would say. And as I just said, having the full virtual twin of a patient that could like participate in a clinical trial, that's far in the future. We still don't have the knowledge today about all the processes in our bodies and how our body is working in order to like develop such a digital twin, like the full patient twin. But the reality is we can already do this for specific organs or tissue and for specific processes in the body. To give you an example, we already know, or we already see digital twins from human brains or human hearts, for instance. And those models are used by surgeons, for instance, in order to train for very complex and complicated operations, surgeries. And we also know some processes where we already have virtual twins, like, for instance, the virtual diabetes model that helps us to predict the blood glucose level and then helps us to inform the right insulin dosage. So those kind of twins are already a reality today.
Thanks. And Sai?
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
Just to build on what Kathrin was saying, right, is the way to look at this is maybe three horizons, right? Like what I mean by that is there is something from an established perspective, and then there is an emerging perspective, and then you can say the third one, which is like a bleeding edge perspective. So where is it really established is like, if you think about the drug development in terms of your formulation, in terms of improving your manufacturing processes, it's like really well established, and there is already value realization happening as we speak. And when it comes to emerging, as Kathrin pointed out, like understanding better diseases, like the disease biology, to understand the cellular level analysis, like generate the data at a cellular level to really understand the disease biology, the gene-to-gene interactions, like all your multi-omics type of a thing, right, is like emerging. I wouldn't say it's established, but it is emerging and emerging fast. And then the bleeding edge is where I talked about like really a virtual twin of a patient. I think the important thing to recognize as we embark on this journey, right, is to be focused on what is the scientific question and how we are able to solve this scientific question, because there are multiple ways about solving the scientific question, right? And we don't want to approach it from the perspective of, okay, I'm going to apply a digital twin hammer for every nail that I would see. So it's important to, one, understand what's the scientific hypothesis, scientific question, and more importantly, you touched upon the data elements, Sophie, earlier, making sure like you have the data to be able to prove or disprove the hypothesis. So some of the fundamental elements have to be ironed out before we embark on this ambition to solve things with digital twins.
So speaking of ironing out, right? We know that in research and development, there are a lot of challenges, but there are big ambitions, right? But there are also lots of opportunity. But specific to digital transformation in medical research, right? And kind of going back to what you were saying, right? Having the established and emerging and that sort of leading edge of where we are with digital twins. Sai, what technological challenges are we facing today specifically for digital twins?
So as you know, like technology is emerging very fast, right? But at the same time, the computational resources are going to be limited at some point. I'm not saying it's the limitation, but I would actually take a step back to look at from a data infrastructure perspective. And when I say data infrastructure, I'm speaking to having the right quality data that's available. It starts with that, and then having the governance of the data to make sure you're able to integrate this data the right way to actually have it like a really strong foundation that you actually can use to like establish this virtual modeling techniques or whatever you need. So I think if you look at from the current challenges perspective, I think I would start with the data part, like, because I mean historically we've been generating a lot of data in the context of R&D, and you can argue like every R&D unit is a data generating company by itself. Now, how best to leverage that data to the problem that you're trying to solve is still a big hurdle that we have to cross. Now, the other part from a challenge perspective is you also need to have a commitment to invest into these technologies, because that's the other challenge a lot of companies face, because while there is a hype, there is also an aspect of reality that's happening, but you don't want to invest in the spirit of fear of missing out. You have to make a conscious investment into this area saying, okay, we believe in this for X, Y, and Z reasons, and it needs to be a sustained, committed investment that needs to go into it. So that's where I think we have some of the challenges or opportunities that we need to go. And I'm sure Kathrin can talk about some of the regulatory aspects. Interested in her take also on this.
No, thanks, Sai. And you touched upon a very important point that we also see from a political perspective, which is like the data quality. And with data, it's not like the more is the better, but it's really about high quality data and reliable data that we can use for the application and development of digital twins, as well as for other digital technologies. So it's really about the quality. And the fact is that today, even though we have lots of data, it's not always like the appropriate quality, and this is due to the fact that we see lots of or a lack of standardization. We have data that has different formats, so you can't compare the data, which doesn't make use then or is not useful for our studies. And data is also located or locked down in silos. So we do not have like interoperable systems where we could exchange data from one source to another. And a very important point also is data protection. I mean, data, particularly health data, is extremely sensitive, and we always have to make sure that we have the data protected and that we ensure that patient privacy is also protected. So there needs to be a harmonized understanding on how do we secure the data protection. Currently, we have a fragmented interpretation across countries, so this is really hindering research also in this regard. So what we would need here from a political perspective is really to establish infrastructures that allow high quality data, or that allow a bigger amount of harmonization and standardization of data that is existing, and then to build infrastructures that are interoperable, that this data can move from the different data sources and can be exchanged. And finally, we also have to make sure that those data spaces or infrastructures then also allow for access to the health data for research purposes in the end.
So speaking about the regulatory landscape, right? Because now once we have when you think about digital twins, you guys have really hit it hard with data and the regulatory requirements that's required and the harmonization that's also required. But understanding truly what a digital twin is, it's a digital version of yourself with a lot of privacy issues, Now I want to kind of consider like the ethical considerations that should be kept in mind as well, right? Because having the groundwork for, as you said, data infrastructure, right? And as you mentioned, Kathrin, the harmonization of it, right? It needs to be reliable, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be comprehensive. But let's talk about, what other ethical considerations should we keep in mind, right? For the scientists who are on the call today, or people who are also interested. So I don't know, Kathrin, if you want to continue on with your regulatory, and we can have Sai jump in.
From my ethical, happy to do so, and thanks. And from the ethical perspective, I would really stress the aspect of data protection again, because this is very crucial. And in order to access data for research, here I would also like to clarify again that when we talk about this access, we talk about anonymous data. So this kind of data which doesn't allow the identification of the individual patient. And this is really important because, to your point, this is sensitive data, and data protection is really key here. But Sai, I guess you have even more concerns or aspects from a technical side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other element or other dimension to look at is also, it's just not for the digital twins, right? Like wherever you're applying this algorithmic development, we cannot have like the black box algorithms. So this is where we put a lot of effort and emphasis on the explainability aspects of it as well. Like how can you explain what the output is? Because when you think about digital twin as an example, it could be a simple replica of a process to making it like really self-autonomous. Now, if you want to make this self-autonomous, right, like you also have to think about what are the ethical considerations, like what decisions are being made, and like where is the risk tolerance, and like what is the element that is needed from an ethical perspective as well. So, these are the considerations, right? And I also believe that in some aspects, the concept of digital twin helps also in the ethical considerations as well, because sometimes like what you do in a physical world, you may not be able to meet all the regulations or all the ethical consideration. So this actually, if you look at it in a positive way, it actually can help you to supplement the ethical considerations as well. So there are like both worlds, but ultimately the idea is to make sure like whatever we do, that's something that we should have front and center of what we are solving for. That's why privacy, things like explainability, making sure like the outputs are validated. These are all the things that we have to consider as we are building the digital twins, and more importantly, using in our key decision-making process.
Maybe, Sophie, if I may, to add again that all those aspects that I just mentioned, it's very important that we have clear requirements laid out for developers to follow. And this is important. For instance, as we mentioned earlier, we could use digital twins also within clinical trials. So today we already have a very strict and robust regulatory framework for clinical trials. how you set them and how you run them and so on. But the use of digital twins is not yet like a normal thing in clinical trials. So we need to understand what are the requirements that we have to fulfill in order to use digital twins. And then again, from a regulatory perspective, we also have to make sure that those regulations and guidelines are harmonized across the globe, because it doesn't make sense to have like different approaches in Europe and the US, for instance, because also the research sites are located across the globe. And if you have, like, for instance, multi-country clinical trials, it's not feasible to have this differences. So international harmonization of requirements is extremely important.
And also for biases, right? Because again, right, as you guys both mentioned, I mean, it's so heavily data driven, right, that sometimes we forget where these algorithms actually come from, right? And so we really, but this is very insightful. And so I guess this is called the reality check, right, of where we sort of are today. And, I think you guys have done a really great job of understanding, where the foundation of this comes from, what is actually possible in the future for medical research, the harmonization globally, not only locally at state or federal levels, but globally on a level of what a framework could look like. So I guess maybe for Sai, how is this digital twin technology already impacting medical research today? Like any, tangible examples would be helpful.
Yeah, maybe I'll give a couple of tangible examples, right? One, like I said, in the manufacturing arena, from a pharma drug development perspective, there are like very strong tangible examples to either to improve the yield of a given product when you think about biologics, or if you want to improve the formulation for any of the compound that you're developing. So the impact there is around the speed and the cost elements that are there. So rather than running like thousands of physical experiments, you actually could have a virtual copy of it, and you can run the simulations and actually use that to specify what you want to manufacture. So that's one. Now, when it comes to the clinical aspects of it, when like people may have heard about the control arms, the virtual control arms and everything. Now, it's not like broadly applicable, but still like various regulatory agencies, FDA, EMEA, like there is a lot of openness towards it. So we are actually using these control arms like where it's applicable. Say, for example, we may not have the full patient cohort population for a given indication that we are pursuing. So there is more openness in those scenarios to use it. Ultimately, how this is helping our patients is, it's serving our purpose that we stand for at Bayer, right? Like bringing new science, new medicines to our patients. So it's helping us bring these medicines faster, in a faster way. And if you think about personalized medicine, like digital twins have a huge part to play when you think about personalized medicine, because you're not going after a factor size of like solving for the mass populations. You're like being very targeted, you're being very specific. So it also has a societal impact in terms of bringing the cost down for our drug development. And these are the examples that are already happening. Now, I think the opportunity that we have as a Bayer and as an industry is to see how we can scale the impact of this thing so that we actually can have a really broad impact with what we do in the healthcare space.
And Kathrin, I have a question following what Sai just mentioned as well. But before we do that, I want to ask the audience members to please put in your Q&A or questions below. I know I have a lot of questions just talking to both Sai and Kathrin now. So feel free to put those in, because we're nearly there at the Q&A. But now kind of going back, Sai, as you sort of mentioned, right? Like there's already a lot happening with digital twins, especially under the biologics. And obviously, we're not targeting the masses anymore. So just from a perspective of personalized medicine, there's already really good tangible, benefit of what digital twins can do. But now going back to you, Kathrin. So what's Bayer doing in this area? But in particular, you talked about the ethics, you talked about the frameworks, you talked about, the global harmonization of that. But what's Bayer doing now?
That's a good question. And Bayer is active in this field of computer simulation for more than 20 years already. And Bayer always used to have those simulations running in parallel to the conventional clinical trials. So touching also on the points that Sai just mentioned on how dosage information and everything, there are some concrete examples where Bayer successfully used computer simulation and twins. For example, in the field of an anticoagulant therapy. Here, it was possible, based on the computer simulation, to identify the perfect or the most efficient dosing for the treatment. And as a result, patients in the clinical trial had less strokes, heart attacks, or thrombosis, and as well less side effects. So this is very beneficial also for the patients immediately, and not only like shortening the process and making it more efficient for the developers in this case, but really immediately beneficial for the patients. Or also the aspect that Sai mentioned, that there's always the objective to avoid control or to replace control arms in clinical trials. There has been also an example, also again in the field of anticoagulants, where Bayer could actually approve a new indication of an existing drug, which was approved for adults and very young children. And based on the data from the young children, and which then were used within the computer simulation and digital twin model, Bayer could actually get the approval from the regulatory authorities for the use of this treatment also in children at an older age. And this is very important because you avoid having another trial and like also wasting a little bit time, but you can actually treat patients that are in need at the moment. And by the way, just for this control arms and reducing or replacing the placebo group, I mean, this is particularly important for those patient groups where you only have like a very small patient group, which you have in rare diseases, for instance, or again, in children and indications. So I think lots of potential is there.
Yeah. And Sai, what about you? Like the acceleration of R&D, like, from the process perspective, from a systematic perspective, anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that I could add, right? Like one is in terms of our target discovery efforts, right? Like one of the things that we are tasked with is to see how we can create the early abundance of opportunities so that we actually can find more targets, ultimately provide the medicines to our patients. So we are using like real deep understanding of the cellular analysis, combining that with a lot of the omics data sets, sequencing data and everything, to start creating these digital twins that will ultimately help interrogate the data and provide us with the targets that we are going after. So that's one area that we focus a lot on. It's already happening. The other area that we focus also on in, like, as you may know, like we have a big radiology presence as well. And with that, we get a lot of medical images. So that ultimately helps our oncology colleagues as well. Like, how do we use this rich medical images information that we have so that we can create a virtual copy, and ultimately can we use this as a predictor for the standard of care that we want to pursue. And we are doing this in our small cell lung cancer indication. So these are the things that are already happening within Bayer under this construct of digital twin. But ultimately, right, what this is to accelerate our R&D efforts, from not only from a speed perspective, but also from increasing the value of our pipeline perspective. which ultimately is going to benefit the patient, because like, I think I'm going to repeat myself here, because the purpose for us is to bring medicines to our patients. So if you think about the mission that we are on, to bring these medicines to the patients, so that's the thing that is the focus for us, which ultimately is enabled by the digital twin technologies.
And speaking of the patients, I know I want to sort of, slowly close this out, but you said, Sai, ultimately we do that. It's for the patients, right? We can always talk about AI supporting drug discovery. We can always talk about how great, these data sets will be for R&D, but really ultimately at the heart of it is bringing, like innovative medicines directly to patients as fast as we can. So, to close this out on a high note, right? What impact and benefit, right, can some of these technologies offer, not just for the patients, but also, as you mentioned, like the healthcare system, right? And we're not going to dive into a health economics discussion, but, it really could benefit health systems, right? And we all know that it really is needed. So, Kathrin, do you want to start there?
Yeah, sure. I totally agree. There is also a healthcare system aspect in this, because imagine the future, and we said we're not there yet, but imagine the future where you have a digital twin of a patient, and that person or the patient goes to the doctor, has a diagnosis of a severe disease, for instance, and you have like a couple of therapy options. And then the digital twin would actually allow the doctor to run those therapy options through the digital twin and identify this one option which is really perfect for that individual patient, which is most efficient and less side effect or least side effects, whatever. And to have this is not only beneficial for the patient because he or she immediately gets the treatment that's fitting the best to his individual needs, but it's also good for the healthcare system, because by avoiding like testing several options, you could be very efficiently using directly the one option that works and save lots of time and money in the end as well. Or also in the area of radiology, where Sai just mentioned the example, where we can have support from digital technologies when evaluating or assessing medical images, and saving lots of time, because digital technologies can replace repetitive tasks, for instance. So this is really supporting not only the benefit of the patient, but also the healthcare system efficiency.
And Sai, would you like to add anything there?
No, I mean, Kathrin summarized it well, right? Because I think ultimately you can have the digital twins at like a various levels. It is a physical object to a process to like a system. And there are a lot of examples even on the outside of the healthcare industry, right? Like the metaverse that people talk about, like the entire Los Angeles city being there. So if you envision that to the healthcare space, like you can, because a lot of times, as you know, like we are getting better at like the electronic health records and all of those things, but we all have experience wherein I do a diagnostic test here, but then you go somewhere else, it's a different thing. But if you think about a healthcare ecosystem as a virtual twin, you actually not only can like provide the necessary insights to the patients or the healthcare providers, but you can also start predicting certain things, which will ultimately bring the cost down, improve the health for everyone. So there are like endless possibilities. But like I said, we definitely have to have that ambition. We have to think future, but we also have to start thinking about like how do we bring certain things to life very fast. So
yeah. I mean, that's great. Yeah. The entire healthcare system as a digital twin. I kind of like that. But speaking of that, now looking ahead, right, we're coming back to our final question for the audience members as well. Please, submit your Q&As now, and we'll get to them very shortly. But for both you, Sai and Kathrin, really the topic of today was, what if we really all had digital twins? What if, digital twins were the entire healthcare system, right? So looking ahead, what are some of the immediate next steps right? You either wish we're being taken up, right? You wish we're being taken up to unlock sort of the full potential that this can really have for, digital technology and also in medical research. Kathrin?
Sure. Well, for me, there are three very concrete next steps that are like necessary in my view. First is, and Sai already mentioned it, electronic patient records, because this is like so crucial to every patient should have access to his or her electronic patient record, not only to empower the patients to have control over their own data, but also to improve immediately the healthcare delivery. And then again, the second step would be to really establish an infrastructure for health data that allows for harmonization and standardization of healthcare data, and also interoperability, because all those different data sources that we see today, starting from electronic patient records where they're existing, then we have disease registries, we have clinical trials, we have even like data from mobile devices like smartwatches and so on. All those different data sources exist, and they are not like connectable, let's say. So we need an infrastructure that allows for this interoperability. And the moment we have this data space, the secure infrastructure to use the data, then we have to allow access to this data for research purposes, because it's with this amount of high quality data that we can learn to build those digital twins and to apply them not only for tissues, organs, and processes, but step by step to further like objectives and purposes.
Yeah. And what about you, Sai? Any immediate next steps you wish to see?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the points that Kathrin has made, right? Like maybe a couple of things I would add, right? Like one is maybe increasing our openness as a pharma industry or a healthcare industry to collaborate, like whether in a pre-commercial setting, because this way means the richer that your data is, the richer like our scientific questions are, getting scientific community together, right? Is definitely one aspect that will help us accelerate our efforts in this space. So some mechanism for us to partner in a pre-commercialization space, which would be definitely one. I think the second element is, I think there is more and more openness from a regulatory perspective, but at the same time, there also needs to be a bit more openness there, like not just from the authorities who are directly responsible. There needs to be a political will that needs to go in. There needs to be an industry influence that needs to go in. So those are maybe the two things I would add, because I think the technology is there. I think one of the important element we didn't touch upon is the people skill aspect of it, because anything we do, ultimately we need to have like the right people with the right skills, with the right mindset that is there. So there also needs to be an openness in terms of the mindset of the people to be exploratory, take a bit more risk. It's getting better, don't get me wrong. It's not that it's not happening. It is happening, but to scale this to a bigger impact, we can all do much more in this space.
Right, right. No, I mean, thank you both. I mean, this is very, very insightful, and I'm sure the audience found it very insightful as well, because we do have some questions that are coming in from the audience now that I'd like to also, send over to you, Sai and Kathrin, so we can actually go into the Q&A at this point. And so for the audience members, again, it's not too late to submit your questions. Our first question is for you, Sai, and it says, I'm curious about specific tech used for digital twins authentication part of the implementation. What can you say about that?
I mean, I cannot speak for like the specific tech because we use multitude of things, right? And I also don't want to give the impression that we are acknowledging some technology provider.
Right.
I hope you can respect that part. But I would say, right, like the specific tech as you think about is, we talked about the data infrastructure as an example, right? You need to make sure you have like the right data infrastructure all the way from the data, the architecture, and the platform configuration that you need to have to get like your near real time or real time data. Then there is a component that is needed, whether you call it as an Internet of Things to stream the data depending on the use case that you're solving for. Now, obviously, the security and privacy things that Kathrin pointed out are super important as well. Then the final piece is about your algorithmic environment, right? Like if you really want to enable like your decision making, like autonomous decision making, you need to have like the right model training environment and also the model deployment environment. So, I mean, we'll share some more of this information in the coming days, like how we are pursuing in terms of some specific technology elements, but I cannot call out some specific technology elements today.
That's fair. That's fair. Thanks, Sai. And this question's actually, I would love for you to start, Kathrin. And this comes from Justin. From your perspective, what are the most significant barriers to the widespread adoption of digital twins in healthcare? And what strategies might overcome these challenges? And the reason why I wanted you to start is because, you're deep in the weeds of regulatory frameworks. You're very well aware of a lot of the policy changes that are happening. So maybe you can start there.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there are the two key barriers, and we discussed them already a little bit. The first one is really the data issue. Unless we have high quality data, reliable data, robust data, we cannot actually start building those digital twins and running them. So this is the very first thing that we have to get right. And I mentioned earlier on, there's a couple of steps that we could take to improve the data landscape, like infrastructure harmonization and all this kind of stuff. So data is key in this regard. And then the second point is really about the regulatory acceptance. And here again, we have to remain in contact and exchange with the regulatory authorities across the globe to really define the requirements that have to be fulfilled, and in terms of the approval process, also to use digital twins in clinical trials, for instance. And maybe also touching on the IT question that Sai just answered. I know that there's an open source platform actually that Bayer initiated some years ago and is now running with industry partners. And it's called Open Systems Pharmacology. And on that platform, as I said, it's open science. You can find software and tutorials on how to set up digital twins. It's about the architecture and the simulation models. And this is really there in order to give access to scientists, competitors, but also regulatory authorities for free, as it's open source, to learn about those methods and to increase also the understanding and acceptance of those models. And only with this we can achieve to have this more commonly used also in clinical trials and then in the broader healthcare system.
Yeah. Was there anything you'd like to also add, Sai? Because you're now more on the tangible side, right, in R&D, where you actually need to put all of this stuff in practice. So your perspective on significant barriers in widespread adoption for digital twins?
I think Kathrin highlighted the one other element I would say again is this AI black box thing, right? Like the things around like trust, privacy, and bias. Like how do you make sure that you create that environment of trust so that people can do? So that's one. And I think the investment part that I touched upon previously is the other element. So you need a level of investment. I'm not saying you need a lot, but you need a level of investment, right size for the ambition a certain company is pursuing in that regard, and also be a little bit patient to see the life of some of these things, right, is also
Right.
important. The third one I say is the mindset. I mean, it sounds simple, but we are all creatures of, I mean, I'm certainly guilty of it. Like sometimes you may be rigid in terms of the thinking. So you have to be more open about it. So that's also the biggest barrier, we think, which touches upon the regulatory engagement and everything that is needed.
No. So thanks both. And, we do have a couple more questions too. And so I want you to hold that thought because there is another question from Bara. So for you, Sai, thank you for your insight, Sai and Kathrin. What applications do you see on the commercialization side? Would it help HCPs in testing out the effectiveness, dosage, side effects, etc., on their patient digital twins before prescribing? Do you see that happening?
So, I mean, I don't have a specific answer. Like on the commercial side, I would maybe just one of the things that might be exciting, right, is like, can you actually have, like, as soon as a baby is born, almost like you start creating maybe a copy of the baby, if you will, and then you start following it, right? Because this way, it's not targeted against a specific drug, but it's about the health of the baby, as an example. So can you actually imagine a world wherein you actually are streaming all of that information and then they go to the doctor's office, here you go, you already have, maybe the doctor is printing a medicine on his or her desk. I mean, I'm just talking a little bit science fiction in the spirit of the question.
In the future.
Yeah. But I mean, there are a lot of applications definitely in the manufacturing and the R&D space. Honestly, commercial, I'm a little bit further away from it. I don't know, maybe Kathrin, you can weigh in on that.
Well, I fully agree with you, Sai. I don't see it commercially right now because this would require, again, lots of first understanding how this works, how we as persons work, and patients and the diseases and all this kind of knowledge that is not existing in this entity at the moment. But yes, in the future, like my example earlier on, I can imagine a time when a patient goes to a doctor and they run a potential treatment options first via the twin before they go into the patient. But clearly, this is the future. And for now, I see the use of digital twins really in the clinical space, where we use them in clinical trials, as mentioned, or for surgeries as a training model or so on, but not like arbitrarily somewhere in the doctor's
fully
process.
out there.
Yeah.
Right. No, thanks, Kathrin and Sai. And we have another question coming in from Michael. This one's for you, Sai. So how do you capture change in symptoms, like lower cognition and or perceived pain levels?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are getting into some of the patient-reported outcomes elements of it, right? I mean, that don't know, to be honest with you, don't know, because it's one of those things, because that's the complexity of the human behavior, right? Because not everyone is built the same way. And so this is something I don't think we have a solution for it. But at the same time, one of the ways to capture it from a physical object as a human is going to be some type of devices, right? Like to help with the pain management or reporting some of the things like sleep monitoring as an example. So those are some of the things that you could do. But honestly, these are some of the challenges that we need to overcome about like patient-reported outcomes, or how do you capture the feelings of a person, because our brain's so different, right? So these are, it's still to come, is what I would say. I don't have an answer. Yeah.
Well, maybe you have an answer for this. I don't know. I'm not trying to call you out, but we do have one more by Wilfred. In the context of developing complex digital twins, such as a digital heart twin, which entity is best suited to spearhead this initiative? And I think maybe from a pharmaceutical perspective, is it more advantageous for a pharma company, a technology firm that's AI focused, or should it be a concerted endeavor, right, involving multiple companies, bringing in unique expertise and knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I don't personally see a pharma company. That's my belief. It's not like Bayer saying it, right? Like I don't see a pharma company being best suited for that type of an endeavor. Like we can bring the science, but there might be someone who actually is well suited. So I think the short answer is I think it will happen in a consortium, like maybe a pharma company partnering with a tech company, with some device company, right? Like because these are the things that need to be brought together to make something like that happen. So it's more of a partnership route. I would see this happening.
Got it. And Kathrin, would that be the same for you?
I'm nodding because I totally agree. I mean, this is so complex that I don't see any entity, be it an IT company or a pure pharma company, to build such a complex thing alone. But the beauty is really in collaboration, where different partners really bring their expertise together. And we see this. I mean, Bayer's also engaged in a couple of collaborations from startups to big companies, computing power, and so on. So the moment we bring these expertise together, then we can really unlock a new level of potential there. So clearly, collaboration, yeah.
I love that. And with that, I mean, you said it really well, Kathrin, Sai, both of you guys, and to our audience members, thanks so much for your insights today, Kathrin and Sai. And, it was a pleasure having you both here, just sort of imagining what a future would look like with sort of endless possibilities with the digital twin. So I want to start concluding this, and I think that's the end of our questions. And so for our viewers, right, I want to thank you for your participation. We really hope that you took something away from this session, as I definitely did, whether it's inspiration, learnings, or just general excitement about what the future of healthcare can actually be. And we hope that it was in your grasp, right, as you're here with us today, and I hope to see you back here soon. But before we go, I do want to make an announcement. So next week on Tuesday, November 21st, we'll actually host our third session. And this time we're sort of shifting gears and asking ourselves, what if the next step in oncology was more kinder, right, or was both kinder and more precise? So interesting conversations will happen there. So please head over to our LinkedIn page under events and save the date and RSVP. And we hope to see everyone who is here there next Tuesday. So thank you to all of our audience members. Thank you, Kathrin, again. Thank you, Sai. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sophie.